What is an exercise snack, and why do researchers think that they are important? Last week, we looked at the link between posture and stress and how a movement break can be a good pattern interrupt for your nervous system, helping you to regulate your nervous system. This week, we're going to take that idea a little further. We're still looking at movement breaks, but we're going to look at it from a slightly different angle. So an exercise snack is basically a term that we use to describe a 2 to 5 minute movement break every 30 to 60 minutes through the day, where you get up from your desk and you move around, with the idea being that it helps for overall health, but specifically for glucose control. So let's take a beat to get a little nerdy and look at some of the research around movement breaks and exercise snacks. So the term exercise snacks comes from a paper that was published in 2014, where they took a small group of people, so there were only 9 people in the study, but they did small bouts of exercise before they ate a meal, and then they measured the response of their blood sugar, so how much blood sugar rose after a meal, depending on if they'd done a short movement break before a meal versus one chunk of movement once through the day. And they found that there was better glucose control for the people who were doing small amounts of exercise around each meal. So then loads of other researchers got interested by this finding, and there've been a lot of studies after that have explored the idea and looked at different ways to approach it. So a number of the studies have found that any type of movement spaced in small amounts through the day helps to attenuate glucose spikes, regardless of the type of the movement that people do. So in Buffy 2022, they looked at sugar control of people who just sat still the whole time, people who stood up for a few minutes on a regular basis, or people who walked for a few minutes on a regular basis. And they found that, no surprises, the worst group for sugar control was the group that just sat still the whole time. There was an improvement for people who stood up, and there was an even bigger improvement for people who walked every couple of hours through the day. A good way to think of this is that your body cares that you moved more than what you did. So don't get too hung up on it, but remember, movement is important. Then in 2023, there was a study that's title started with "After dinner, rest a while. After dinner, walk a mile," which I find quite funny. But in that study, they looked at the effect of no movement versus movement before a meal versus movement after a meal, and looked at sugar control, blood sugar control, and they found that walking for 10 minutes after a meal was helpful in controlling blood sugar. Then the last study that I found really interesting was the University of Houston soleus push-up study, which sounds like a slightly strange name, but your soleus is a muscle deep inside your calf, and it's a muscle that you use for endurance, so it tends to work really well aerobically burning glucose. And what they did with the study is they had people sitting at their desk through the day just doing a calf raise, so pushing up from their toes using their calf muscles, so just up and down while they were sitting. They did this at quite a large amount, so it was, I think, about 4.5 hours over the day, and the smallest gap between doing it was about 4 minutes. But they found that there was a massive effect on decreasing glucose spikes and decreasing insulin spikes in their blood. So something as simple as a little calf raise seated at your desk can actually make an appreciable difference to your blood sugar. And this has been repeated in other studies that have looked at doing it in smaller doses since, and we're still figuring out what the best way to use it is and what the most user-friendly way to use it is. So now that we know what the research has found, why does it actually matter? So what makes a movement break a good thing for blood sugar control? So when your muscle is moving, GLUT4 proteins move to the outside of the muscle, which means that your muscle can then take glucose into the muscle without being reliant on insulin to make that happen. So movement of the muscle, contraction of the muscle, allows the muscle to take up glucose independent of insulin. And then the second reason is when you're still for a long time, your muscle does actually stop taking that glucose in. So regularly breaking up static positions, seated positions at the desk, helps to reactivate that uptake through the day. So it helps to keep your overall glucose levels a little bit flatter. Then the last thing that's important is timing. So after you eat a meal, your body starts to absorb glucose into the system, and by moving after a meal or after a snack, it immediately starts to move glucose back out of your bloodstream into the muscles that need to use it for fuel. So it's the timing as it starts rising, it starts being pulled out of the bloodstream. If you're wondering why this is important, we discussed the importance of glucose control and insulin sensitivity and minimizing spikes in a recent blog post in our metabolic health series, and I will pop a link for that into the blog post below this video. So it's all good and well to get nerdy about the research, but what does that actually mean on a practical level? So I'd like to suggest that there's 3 ways that you can do this. One that is very low friction, one that's quite easy to do, and then the one that's most effective. And they will all actually make an improvement in the way that your body handles glucose control through the day. So the first one is literally that calf raise. So that soleus push-up while you're sitting at your desk. So if you're on a call, if the video is off, or if you're listening to something, if you have to watch a video for any reason, anything along those lines, you can sit at your desk and just push off your toes, raising your heels, and then drop them down, and just continuously do that for a few minutes to activate your soleus muscle. And the second thing that you can do is to take a 2 to 5 minute movement break regularly through the day. This can be as simple as walking around the office. It can be doing 10 to 15 nice slow squats next to your desk. You could stand up, lean against a counter and do a push-up. Basically just getting up and moving. Flights of stairs, lap around the office while you go to grab your coffee, all those sorts of things. So the highest leverage, a single habit that you can create, is actually a 10-minute walk after your largest meal of the day. And it's really that simple. So after you eat, relatively soon afterwards, so ideally in the next couple of minutes, get up and walk for 10 minutes. So as you can see from these 3 simple ideas, supporting your health, supporting your glucose control doesn't have to be complicated. So don't overthink it. Rather, I'd like to invite you to think about how you can build this into things you already are doing in your day. So for example, if you know you're going to need to pop into the shops at some point in the day, why not plan to do that straight after a meal so that you're walking after the meal? You could go down to the cafeteria at work and then take the long route back up to the office, include a couple flights of stairs in there so that your body is moving and you're moving glucose into your body. It could mean after you have dinner in the evening, going out to water the garden afterwards. It could even mean washing the dishes after a meal. So just think of small ways that you move and then things that you need to do through your day and how you can pair them after a meal to help your body to move the glucose out of your system. And then remember that small chunks through the day also does show better overall glucose control rather than just doing one bout of exercise. So even if you do go to the gym in the morning or in the evening, it's still important that you're getting up and moving around through the day. So if you'd come across the idea of exercise snacks before and wondered if they were just a trend or a fad, I hope this has helped you to understand them, and I hope that you find it helpful in building your own routine that works for you and that supports your health. If you're interested in learning a little more about anything that I've chatted about in this video, I'm including a link to all of the papers below this video in the blog post. And I really do hope that you found it helpful in supporting your journey to creating habits that support your health and give you a thriving life. If you enjoy this sort of content, this sort of guidance, please do sign up for our emailing list in the blog post below this, and I'll notify you when new posts come out.